Zohran Mamdani is very upset.
I want to use this moment to speak to the Muslims of New York City. I want to speak to the memory of my aunt.
Hey everyone, I'm Rich Lowry, and what exactly has Mamdani in such an emotional state? What could it be? What happened to his aunt? Something terrible, clearly, after September 11th. Let's hear more.
I want to speak to the memory of my aunt. Who stopped taking the subway after September 11th because she did not feel safe in her hijab.
Oh, so what you're really telling us is that nothing happened to her at all. No one, God forbid, shoved her. No one bullied her. No one even looked askance at her, according to this account. She just had this fear about going into the subways. Now, it's a shame she had to think about it at any level, but the correct lesson to take from this, if you're going to be the next mayor, very likely, of New York City, is that you should work overtime to make everyone feel absolutely safe in the subway so no one has any level of concern whatsoever. That obviously is not the lesson Mamdani is going to take. And by the way, of all the things to get really emotional about when thinking about September 11th and its aftermath, how about getting choked up about the memory of two jetliners full of jet fuel screaming in to two iconic New York City buildings? How about the hundreds of firefighters selflessly, courageously climbing the stairs of burning buildings trying to help people get out? How about thinking about the toxic debris smoldering there in New York City at ground zero for so long? How about all of that? No, he's upset about his aunt, who turns out not actually to be an aunt. He had to go back and correct and say it was actually his dad's cousin. Why the disproportionate concern over this? Well, because it drives a narrative of Muslim victimhood.
I want to speak to the Muslim who works for our city. Whether they teach in our schools or walk the beat for the NYPD. New Yorkers who all make daily sacrifices for the city they call home, only to see their leaders spit in their face. I want to speak to every child who grows up here, marked as the other, who is randomly selected in a way that never quite feels random, who feels that they carry a stain that can never be cleaned.
What is he talking about? What city leaders are spitting on Muslims or otherizing Muslims? There's a reason New York City has the largest population of Muslims of any city in the United States. It's extremely welcoming. Nearly 300 mosques in the city. The Eid holidays recognized by the New York City public schools. Halal food all over the place. I go to Midtown to a spot where there's a halal food cart with a line around the block every single evening. People of all sorts of backgrounds lining up to enjoy the food. Even after September 11th, yes, there are people who said and did stupid things directed at Muslims. But the statistics in the decade after September 11th show that hate crimes, or so-called hate crimes, were committed at a higher rate against blacks, against gays, against Jews than against Muslims. But Mamdani loves this narrative. Here's more.
For as long as we have lived, we have known that no matter what anyone says, there are still certain forms of hate that are acceptable in this city. Islamophobia is not seen as inexcusable. One can incite violence against our mosques and know that condemnation will never come.
This, too, is utterly fantastical. Who's inciting violence against mosques? Again, let's go back to September 11th. Hugely traumatic event for the nation. What does the President of the United States at the time, George W. Bush, of course, do? Within days, he goes to an Islamic center in Washington, D.C. to condemn hatred directed at Muslims. But none of this matters for Mamdani. He wants to end his campaign portraying himself as the victim, to deflect charges of anti-Semitism, to discredit his opponents, and to advance this narrative that he is deeply committed to, that we are a fundamentally racist society. So it's amazing to think that 20 years later, we're going to go from a mayor, Rudy Giuliani, who understood the dire threat of Islamic terrorism, to a mayor who thinks Islamophobia is a dire threat to the city. We're going to go from a mayor who understood the civilizational challenge we were in to a mayor who believes the civilizational struggle is purifying ourselves or trying to of our own awful sins. From a mayor who revived his career in the crisis after September 11th to a mayor who will create a crisis of his own making in the city. And by the way, a mayor who's caught up in his own private psychodrama.
Since I announced my candidacy for mayor 1 year ago yesterday, I have sought to be the candidate fighting for every single New Yorker, not simply the Muslim candidate. I've carried these indignities with me each moment of this race, doing so all the while as the first major Muslim candidate in the history of our city. I thought that if I could build a campaign of universality, I could define myself as the leader I aspire to be, one representing every New Yorker, no matter their skin color or religion. And I thought that if I behaved well enough or bit my tongue enough in the face of racist, baseless attacks, all while returning back to my central message, it would allow me to be more than just my faith. I was wrong.
Oh, please. He's been completely open the entire campaign that he's a Muslim man. In fact, it's been something he's boasted about.
It was an unusual moment in the Democratic mayoral primary today as Zohran Mamdani teared up when he was talking about what it's like to be the first Muslim to run for mayor.
Local elections are less than a month away, and the young man leading the mayor's race, if elected, will be the first ever Muslim to hold the office.
And I heard you're going to be the first Muslim mayor. I said, yes. They said, am I going to be able to buy alcohol?
Major candidate for mayor in the Republican Party is slandering me as the first Muslim candidate on the verge of becoming the mayor of the city.
Who's representing communities that have not been as representative. A Muslim, a young person, a progressive, a democratic socialist.
It's hard to see, by the way, any residual effects of Islamophobia on Zohran Mamdani himself. This is a guy, son of Columbia professor, son of an Oscar-nominated filmmaker, attends the prestigious Bronx School of Science in New York City, then goes on to study at Bowdoin College, an elite liberal arts school, then at age 29 becomes a state assemblyman, then the Democrats nominate him to be the next mayor of New York City at age 33. He's now 34 because he's had a birthday since. If this is the product of Islamophobia, all of us should want some form of sectarian hatred directed at us to give us rocket fuel in our careers. Of course, the reason Zohran is being attacked in ways he doesn't like is, one, we're in the closing days of a high-stakes mayoral election. Two, these attacks fundamentally are about his extremist views on Israel and Zionism rather than his own religious faith. And he wants to use Islamophobia as a shield to protect his views from attack. This, by the way, is why the Muslim Brotherhood decades ago invested so much in promoting the notion of Islamophobia in order to deflect from these sort of criticisms. Does Mamdani really believe that if they're a Christian candidate leading in the New York City mayoral race right now, and this candidate didn't believe that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state, routinely accused Israel of genocide, and refused for the longest time to condemn the terroristic phrase globalize the Intifada, does he really think that candidate would skate? Look at Marjorie Taylor Greene, for instance, harsh critic of Israel, and she takes all sorts of incoming criticisms for it, and I can assure you that is not based on anti-Muslim sentiment, but Mamdani, in these remarks, was working himself up to a grand finale.
But there is one thing that I will change. I will no longer look for myself in the shadows. I will find myself in the light.
It's so hilarious. This is a guy who ran in a mock election in his middle school. This is a guy who ran for vice president of the student body in high school. This is a guy who became a state assemblyman before he reached the age 30 and might be the next mayor of New York City before he reaches age 35. And we're supposed to believe all this time he's been living in the shadows as he serially promoted himself and run for office? It's so callow. It's so juvenile. It's so self-involved. If you put aside his communistic ideology and his hideous anti-Semitism, he should be disqualified in this race based on his lack of seriousness alone. Ed Koch, former mayor of New York City, in a different time, different kind of man, once said after he lost a re-election bid, the voters have spoken and now they must be punished. I'm afraid if New Yorkers speak in a week or so and choose Zohran Mamdani, they're going to have to be reacquainted with the wisdom of Ed Koch. I'm Rich Lowry. Over and out.